Hello there, you supremely attractive person you. I'm Chris from TechSpert, and today we're going to be taking a good long hard squint at the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite, which at 279 quid is one of the cheapest OnePlus handsets you can snaffle right now in 2022. Now you may be a wee bit confused by all of these Nord branded handsets that are suddenly cropping up, and believe me, you're not alone. Keeping track of these things is kind of like trying to solve quadratic equations after 10 pints of Stella while irritated badgers nibble at your toes. Basically, they're all mid-range smartphones. Top of the pile is the £369 OnePlus Nord 2T, which replaces last year's Nord 2. If you've got a little bit less cash to spend, you can always grab the £299 Nord CE2, which strips back some of the specs to get that lower price point. And last up is the Nord CE2 Lite, this phone here, which is 20 quid cheaper again, but makes a few more cutbacks, including scrapping that OLED screen for a more basic LCD panel and slowing down the charging speed. Although it does also offer some advantages, including a bigger battery. So enough waffle anyway, let's whip the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite on out of the box and take you on a full tour. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers. So let's see what you get in the box, besides the rather obvious inclusion of the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite. Well, you got yourself OnePlus's typically shiny red USB cable. You've got a still pretty chunky 33 watt Super VOOC charger. Bit of pop-up action there, you love to see it. It's good to see that OnePlus is continuing the tradition of its charming little welcome letter. And hey, yes, you do get a condom case bundled with the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite as well to keep it safe from harm. And there you have it, that's everything that you get bundled in this here box. So here we have the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite, nice succinct name there. They do officially slap a 5G on the end of that as well, but I simply refuse to add that onto. Like at this price point in 2022, yes, you would expect 5G. And it's pretty typical OnePlus design. They're certainly not pushing the boat out or anything. This is the Blue Tide model, but you can also grab it in Black Dusk. Could have just been black or dusk, but no, Black Dusk. And while a fair few mid-range mobiles around this price point do rock a glass rear, it's your bog standard plastic back here on the Nord CE2 Lite. And what I do like is the fact that OnePlus appears to have actually listened to feedback, because in a couple of previous handsets they had the bottom bit, the bit you actually hold, was a shiny finish, whereas the top half was a matte finish. And then of course the shiny bit gets all nasty grubby fingerprints all over it. Whereas here in the Nord CE2 Lite, the top bit here is quite shiny and the bottom half has got a matte finish, so that does repel the greasy, grimy prints and stuff. And I've got to say, I do rather like this colour scheme. It's rather fetch and it's quite tranquil. In fact, it's calmed me right the f down. You can almost picture yourself floating in a Caribbean sea, sipping a margarita, possibly out of a coconut. I wouldn't want to commit. You do unfortunately get all this nonsense printed down at the bottom, but only a little bit of branding around back. And that camera chassis only juts out ever so slightly from the rear end. The edges are also constructed from plastic, and then around front you've got toughened glass, apparently not Gorilla Glass specifically, but hopefully you should be able to put up with a bit of punishment without scratching up, and you do have a pre-installed screen protector as well. And at 195 grams, the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite has a decent heft to it, but doesn't feel cumbersome or anything. It's a little bit bigger than the likes of the OnePlus Nord 2T as well, at 6.6 inches. So one-handed use can be a little bit tricky, but at least you do have some one-handed help chucked in there. This of course comes courtesy of OxygenOS 12, which is slapped on top of Android 12. No compromise on the software side despite the lower price. And yeah, OxygenOS does have a different vibe to it these days, now that Oppo and OnePlus are kind of smushing themselves together like two amorous barracudas. But pretty much all your favourite OxygenOS features are still packed away in there, just generally in a slightly different form. And OnePlus, as ever, is guaranteeing 2 Android OS updates. You'll get updated to Android 13 and then Android 14 beyond that as well, and 3 years of security updates, so you are set for the future. So you can access the notifications drawer by dragging down from anywhere on screen. You can still access the shelf feature, however, by swiping from the right hand side, just up at the top there, so at least you've got the option of both. And as always, that shelf is fully customizable, so you can add and remove any features that you might like. So you don't use Spotify, well, you can just ditch that. And you can personalize your smartphone as well, although there are less options than usual because you can't get an always-on display on there, for instance. That's because it's not OLED tech, unfortunately. No horizon light option either, but you can change up the icons, the UI colors, etc. And thankfully the work-life balance feature is on board as well. I really like that because it just prevents every single app from pinging you and disturbing you when you're just trying to chill the heck out. And then beyond that, pretty standard Android really. You've got the likes of the apps tray, your Google Discover feed and your notifications drawer. Sadly no alert slider on the Nord CE2 Lite though. That's something that has been culled, which you can get on the more expensive Nords. And I've got to say, not a massive fan of this edge-mounted fingerprint sensor either, which is built into the power button. More often than not, it does fail to recognize me and it ends up just using the face unlock instead, which does seem to work every time at least. I've tried registering my print on there a couple of times now and it doesn't really seem to have helped much, unfortunately. As for your storage, well here in the UK, certainly the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite comes in one flavour, 128GB. And the good news is not much of that space is used up by the system either. Quite a lot of this is just good old Genshin Impact, which takes up a whopping 15-16 gigs these days. And yank out that SIM tray, there is actually space for a micro SD memory card to expand that storage, something you don't get in more expensive OnePlus smartphones, although unfortunately you do have to sacrifice the second SIM slot for that memory card. Now, one of the biggest sacrifices if you want to save yourself 20 quid over the Nord CE2 and pick up this Lite model is the display, because it's unfortunately an LCD panel, not AMOLED. You've still got a full HD plus resolution, so your visuals are still fairly crisp. The viewing angles are still alright as well, and on top brightness, you can still just about see what's going on even when the sun is shining directly onto that screen. However, the contrast isn't quite as strong. Those colours aren't quite as poppy and punchy and delightful. So overall, if you do use your phone to browse your photo albums, to, kick back with some Netflix, some Disney Plus, things like that, I'd say maybe try and spend the extra 20 quid and get an OLED panel. You can play around with the likes of the colour output here in the display settings, but it doesn't have quite as much impact here on the Nord CE2 Lite. And the one advantage that this phone does have over the standard Nord CE2 is the fact that you do have 120Hz refresh support, which as you can see there is active by default, but seriously, my knackered old peepers certainly can't tell the difference between 90Hz and 120Hz. They both look buttery smooth to me, so I'm not really sure it's that much of an advantage. As for your audio, well, it is a single bottom firing speaker here on the Nord CE2 Lite, no stereo speaker setup or anything like that. Let's see if it's actually alright. But if you live in North America, sucks to be you, I'm afraid. Not coming to you guys just yet, so go have a bit of a cry about that one. So it's sort of reasonably loud for a mono speaker output, so hopefully should be alright for, just watching a bit of YouTube on the go or whatever, but quite tinny as well as you would probably expect. Thankfully, you do get a headphone jack down on the bottom bit of the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite, so you can get jacked in if you like. Otherwise, there's full Bluetooth 5.2 support. And you've actually got full support for LDAC, aptX HD and everything on this phone as well. So great news if you've got a decent pair of headphones or a decent speaker. So the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite is powered by the Snapdragon 695 chipset, backed here in Byyyeeeee at least by 6 gigs of RAM, and the everyday performance seems perfectly smooth. Certainly just as slick as other 695 handsets that I've personally played around with. The benchmarking results here on Geekbench pretty much as expected, not particularly hot on the single core, but the multi-core makes up for it. And the good news is that any gamers will get a kick out of the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite as well. If you do want to play more intensive titles like Genshin Impact, then be warned, here on the CE2 Lite, you will have to play on the lowest graphical settings and you'll still see some judder and stumbles in that frame rate here and there as well. It's playable, but it's not a great experience. You're definitely better off with a PubG or a Call of Duty, something a bit lighter. But at least OxygenOS does chuck in the usual gaming features, and I quite like the updated version of the gaming menu here. Even though it is slightly more awkward to pull out, you get plenty of great tools packed in there, including screen sensitivity, options, usual notifications, blockers, all that good stuff. And yes, the Snapdragon 695 chipset does have a 5G modem bunged in there as well, so you do have full 5G support here on the Nord CE2 Lite, hence it's actually officially the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite 5G. And so far, no issues with the Wi-Fi connectivity either. It downloaded Genshin Impact pretty bloody fast, despite the fact it's an absolute whopper. As for the battery tech, well, this Lite model doesn't boast the same super speedy charging as a lot of its Nord siblings. You've got 33 watt fast charger, which is still reasonably nippy, to be fair. No, you can't bung a cable in its bottom and get it half charged in about 10 minutes or anything like that. But, if you're just going to be charging it overnight or anything like that, job done. You've got the adaptive charging tech and everything packed in there as well. And the good news is the Lite model boasts a bigger battery than a lot of its brothers. It's got a 5,000 mAh capacity battery stuffed inside of that lovely tranquil blue shell. So you've got a bloody big battery and also drains really slowly, courtesy of the likes of the Snapdragon 695, which is really energy efficient. So that means stunning battery life on this thing. So for example, yesterday I played around with this phone, I fully charged it overnight, good to go this morning. I've had the screen on for an hour and a half so far today, showing off the various features, streaming a bit of video for you, etc, etc. And so far, the battery is only drained to 87%. So yeah, if you don't go nuts, you'll easily stretch 2 days of play out of a full charge of this thing, no worries. So anywho, let's finish up this OnePlus Nord CE2 unboxing with a squint at the camera tech, headed up by a 64 megapixel shooter. This does capture 16 meg images by default, but you can swap up to the maximum resolution with a quick tap up here if you fancy it. Quite handy if you want to crop into a shot without losing much in the way of detail, but of course the lighting conditions have to be really good, as this does away with the pixel binning. I've got to say the autofocus seems pretty reliable, the shutter speed is nice and nippy as well. And here's just a few quick examples of sample photos that I shot around the old homestead to show off the CE2 Lite camera capabilities. And of course, as always, you've got the full selection of bonus modes, including a portrait shot if you want to get a nice bokeh style background effect, complete with the usual retouch and filter options. And you also have that dedicated nightscape mode as well, which can help brighten up a shot when lighting is in short supply. Couple other bits checked on there as well, including a dedicated Pro mode. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to offer the option of shooting in RAW format, unlike more premium OnePlus smartphones, but you do have full control over the white balance, the ISO levels, all the usual shenanigans. And because you have a basic 2 megapixel macro snapper on the back end of the CE2 Lite, you've also got a macro mode. And things are quite basic. If you want to shoot a bit of home movie action, you can only shoot at 720p or 1080p resolution, unfortunately. Again, there's no option for 30 or 60 frames per second. But again, here's some quick, simple test footage I shot around the homestead just to give you an idea of what it's all about. Just my cat's looking very moist indeed after a sudden downpour. And then last up around front, you've got a 16 megapixel selfie shooter using a Sony sensor. I believe it's the IMX471. So again, it should be absolutely fine for your simple shareable shots. And I don't really know how I do it time after time, just absolute bangers. First take. Here's a couple more selfies I shot when I wasn't actually talking at the camera at the same time, just for comparison. And here's a sexy bit of video that I shot using that 16 megapixel selfie camera. Again, tops off at full HD plus resolution, and the visuals are okay for sort of an ambient, low light environment and all that. And you've got reasonably clear audio pickup. And that, in a succulent wee nutshell, is the fresh new OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite 5G. And I gotta say, personally, I'd rather spend a little bit of extra cash, get that OLED panel, slightly beefier performance as well. But if battery life is your bag, well, this thing can keep on going and going like the friggin' Duracell bunny. Be available here in the UK for 279 quid via the usual suspects, direct from OnePlus, and also probably in the likes of Amazon as well. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments below if you like, otherwise don't if you can't be bothered. Please do poke, subscribe and ding that notifications bell though, that's very important indeed, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!